Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Low Key Legends, and I have another story for you today. And this is a tale that I ran, a story that I ran in a game that I ran, and this is going to be about backstories, how to integrate them, how to involve them. But I'll tell you the story, and then I'll tell you exactly what I had and what my thoughts were on it. So this is a story about a character named Krulus. Krulus was a paladin. And it was in the first 5e game I had ever run. Long-term game. I ran a few shorts, but this was a long-term full campaign. 1 to 20, about 2 years, two and a half years worth of gameplay. And with its final conclusion. We started, my first idea of this game was essentially... we played on what was like a world tree, like a Yggdrasil, if you please. And you could fly up to the different tiers of Yggdrasil, and like every plane or plateau that you arrived at was like its own little different mini world. And they were adventuring through them. So, and the Underdark was underneath at the roots of it. So we decided I wanted to take a break so I could write the rest of the story. And my friend Josh, he took over for me for a little bit, run a little side story. He had an idea. He thought it would fit in this kind of plane I was doing. He really enjoyed it. He was like, yeah, this will be great. So I'm like, yeah, man, go for it. I can get a little player action, and party got wiped. He wiped the party. Total TPK. And he looks at me like, man. And I was like, you wiped the party, which put me in a really weird spot. Like, I didn't know what I was going to do. And it was really weird because the only survivor technically was the NPC that my friend's character had with her. And he was the only survivor. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do? Well, guess we're doing I had an arc where they were in like a limbo and they had to fight their way back. And the result was them coming back. But for a while, I did not know what I was going to do about that. Thanks, Josh. Apocalypse Josh. If you don't know what that means, I detail it in my verbal podcast, Coffee and Crits, about Apocalypse Josh. That story's there. I'll save it for another time. But anyway, Krulus. It is at this point, Krulus joins the party. And we meet the paladin. And essentially, what you find out is he is from a land that him, a ally, and a king essentially formed their own nation. Like a young prince became a king. And that's when he got the title, the right arm of the dragon. And his best friend, well, one of the two best friends he had, became the left arm of the dragon. So, essentially, everyone got to kind of play through their lives in this place. So this is the first time I decide, well, I guess I can start exploring a bit of Krulus's backstory, because I can let him see how he died. So essentially through this, he finds out that, his best friend, who is now the king, and his other best friend, who is the other side, they're all sitting in the throne room together. All these troops come in from an invading force. They look to be using demons and other types of creatures in their army. They all stand up to face this threat together as friends. And then the left hand of the dragon stabs Krulus in the back, killing him. So he looks at so now he remembers, not only did he die and he wasn't able to protect his king, but he also was betrayed by his closest friend. So we keep going with the story, and he knows eventually we'll arrive at that plateau where his kingdom is. So once we get there to the realm that he is from, we arrive at a realm at war, and he realizes the kingdom that he helped start is still around, but they're being attacked. And he rushes to their aid. He finds that the king's line is still intact, But he is now is like the last of his line, a very young ruler. He finds that there is like a statue of himself erected, and he finds out that the enemy of this kingdom is someone who is just called the Betrayer. And he's been that way for 60 years. It is not long before he realizes that it is his old friend, who is the left hand of the dragon, that is the Betrayer, who still has unnatural vigor in life, who has tamed these monsters. He finds his like the love of his life, because he's died and time has passed, because he didn't technically know when he had died, because when you're in limbo, there's no real time. So he had died like 50 years ago. So he finds that the woman he loved is now an old woman who has a daughter and granddaughters. And he finds out that the granddaughter was captured by the Betrayer. He then later learns that this granddaughter is his line. Because they were to be married. And this is his line. And he believes that the Betrayer captured her because of this. So it kind of makes this huge, not only is it like a war, but now it's a rescue. He's out to rescue his granddaughter. And here's the thing. When it comes to a character and their backstory, and it comes to doing things to their character, doing things to their life, there has to be a certain amount of trust. As a DM, you gotta let your player know, in the end, I'm just trying to make a good story, and you have to like kind of trust me with that. And Nick is the kind of character who's just like, do what you will, but not every person is like that. Not every person is accepting of you doing things to their NPCs and their family. Like some characters make people, some people make characters, that don't have family or friends because they're scared the DM is going to use them in a bad way and not to enhance the story. But sometimes you can use it in a really good way, and it just kind of depends on what you're going for. But I pretty much, Nick gave me a land of war and turmoil, so I was like, this is kind of like the vibe, very much on board. So, they go to do the rescue. They find the granddaughter, finding out that she was she was captured by this evolved Medusa who serves the Betrayer, and she is with child, and it is the Betrayer's child. And he goes off for this final confrontation to defeat the man who ruined his life and stuff like that. So they go off for this big climactic kind of attack on the castle. They fight, and I started off with him calling him out. And so in combat, I started off as a one-on-one duel. Like, I knew that that's not how this boss fight was going to end, but I gave him this like one-on-one duel phase kind of thing. Almost very much like gamey. Like, this is the first phase. You guys are both, so they have like this duel. And during this duel, they're talking about like the times they had together. And very much my inspiration from the Wheel of Time was like, do you remember when we learnt the game of swords and learnt to kill with it? You remember one of those desperate battles, Lewis Theron? Anyway, sorry. Wheel of Time tangent. Those will happen in the future because I love that book series. Moving on. So they have this climactic, impactful battle. And Krulus is a paladin, so there is smiting involved. They're like level 12, so there's a lot of smiting involved. So he smites hard enough to defeat the first half of it, and then like this ichor kind of like pours out and then becomes like a shadow dragon. That's when everyone comes in to fight, and that's when something else happens. And I'm going to get into this anyway, where there's times where you want to improv and there's times where you want to kind of stick with the script. So he's defeated him, and now he's just in this sludge, and it's and then his like, he's looking at him, and they knew the final enemy was who put things in motion was Asmodeus. They knew Asmodeus was the final villain who had put things in motion. And this was like their first, they already got some glimpses of him. So, like, I start describing that the shadowy kind of smoke that whisks off of him begins to kind of form the vestige of a devil or a demon. And as it starts to leak off of him, he looks over at Krulus with, like, eyes, like clear eyes, not like the blackened irises I had described when they first met. And he looks at him and just goes, like, what have I done? And I just decided right then and there that he was controlled the entire time, a puppet watching his body betray his king, kill his best friend, like, you know, assault his friend's line, and he was just there for the ride to be hurt and broken. So the whole situation changes, and he realizes that this mist is now a vestige, and it's just like it starts to take his soul, and it becomes this fight where half the party, not really a fight, but more like skill checks, where half the party is like fending this thing off while Krulus is doing the ceremony spell to redeem his friend's soul. So they finish just in time, and his soul is essentially saved from it being devoured. He's been completely purged. The betrayer is no more. It is just the left hand of the dragon, one of his best friends. And he looks at him as just kind of this moment of, can I ask for forgiveness? And like, you just knew the scene was just really hitting, which he wasn't expecting at all. He was pretty much very much expecting, like, I very much played it like a just standard bad guy thing. And there was this moment of forgiveness. And then in that moment of forgiveness, I pretty much gave Nick like an ascension thing for completing his backstory, which is something I do. Like when I put a big backstory element in it and you finish that storyline, there's usually like a big old boon at the end of that. Like something special, just some special sauce just for you when you finish those. That's another thing. But we'll do backstories as a whole in a separate video. So they free him. They do this. They destroy the army that the betrayer controls. And Krulus decides to like ride back to the kingdom right then and there. He wants to see his beloved because her time is short. And as he begins to ride, he starts hearing hooves and other riders catching up with him. And he realizes that because of his injuries, he's not dead, but he's on the line. And essentially, the men he fought with to establish this kingdom are like riding beside him as like the land of like the victorious dead and him are kind of like moving side by side. So he starts looking around and they start kind of talking to him jovially as if it, as if they, like picking like a bunch of friends who haven't seen a friend in a long time. And then he sees his king who was killed, his best friend, and it looks at him and just kind of like, you've done well, my friend. I am glad to see you here. I thought I would see you sooner, but it looks like your job was not done. And they're both riding together. And then riding on the other side of him is the left hand of the dragon. And here riding, and he kind of looks at him. Thank you. I did not think I could ride with the host once again. So you have this thing, and I look at him, and I'm like, Nick, you have a choice to make. You can choose to ride off with them right now to this afterlife of glory and hunts and battle and pass away with your comrades into pretty much like an Elysium heaven Valhalla mix kind of place. You can go right now, or you can stay alive, or you can live. And Nick looked at me, and you could tell like he was like really torn with the emotions. He's like, I look at them and I tell them my work isn't done yet, but I'll see them soon. And then they all just kind of ride off behind him, talking about they're waiting for him to join in the hunt. And that's how we kind of ended his backstory. But it was super just impactful, and it's probably one of my better ideas. Like, not every one of them hits so smooth. Some of them definitely don't ring out like that. But what I would say is when a person gives you a backstory, try to incorporate it in a way that you feel like will be meaningful instead of, I've seen people just like, oh, yep, that's the thing. That was in your backstory. That's where you're from. All right, and move on. If you're going to have people write you a backstory to use in your story, then integrate it in. And like I said, we'll go more into that, but it just shows you how you don't have to write all of the game yourself. When you have players that give you material, that's material. Like, I make whole arcs based off of backstories, and those arcs are sessions. So in other words, when my players give me a backstory, they're helping me write the game. And that is a really excellent way to have material for what you want to do. So just something to think about. Don't worry, there are going to be a lot more videos about making characters and doing all that stuff. But I just wanted to bring out this story about it. And plus, it was a really good story. We all think about it with fond memories. So continue to listen, continue to like. Don't forget to hit notification and subscribe. Soon, we're going to be having way more things up. I am starting a podcast, just complete audio, Vampire the Masquerade, New Orleans by Night, because I've been in a big White Wolf kick. Super hyped for Werewolf the Apocalypse to come out. But that's a side note. Anyway, continue to do that, guys. And remember, the quest never ends.